So this talk is taken from Mark chapter 8 and it's about journey and identity. Firstly, I want to show you an image of a woman. How old do you think this woman is? Now, some people say about 60, 70 years old, and some people say about 20. I don't know if you can see that, but there's actually two images of a woman here. Firstly, the old woman. This is her nose here, and this is her mouth and her chin. But then there's also a younger woman that's looking away, so that's her eyelashes there and her nose, and her chin comes down here, and that's her ear there. So hopefully you can see both images. But people look at this and they're looking at the same thing but can come to very different conclusions. I thought it would be helpful to step back and look at an overview of Mark as a timeline of the journey that the disciples have been on to this point, the first 8 chapters of Mark. So we'll have a look at an overview of the book and then also look at some of the key events that have happened in this journey that the disciples have been on, particularly about the identity of Jesus. So to start with, who is Mark, the author of this book in the Bible? Now his fuller name is John Mark. He wasn't one of the 12 disciples. He knew Peter well, and he travelled as a helper with Paul and Barnabas on their first missionary journey. Okay, so an overview of the book. Here's how one biblical scholar puts it. Mark wastes no time in getting down to business. A single sentence introduction, and not a digression to be found from beginning to end. An event has taken place that radically changes the way we look at and experience the world, and he can't wait to tell us about it. There's an air of breathless excitement in nearly every sentence he writes. The sooner we get the message, the better off we'll be, for the message is good, incredibly good. God is here, and he's on our side. Mark is in a hurry to tell us what happened in the birth, life, death and resurrection of Jesus, the event that reveals the truth of God to us, so that we can live in reality and not illusion. He doesn't want us to waste a minute of these precious lives of ours ignorant of this most practical of all matters, that God is passionate to save us. Okay, so that's an overview. Now let's look at the approximate timeline. So Jesus was actually born around 5 BC. So was born 5 years before himself, before Christ, which is technically his first miracle, I suppose. But just to explain that, it was in the 6th century that the AD-BC system of dating was established based on their best estimate at that time of when Jesus was born. But after that it was realised that Jesus was actually born about 5 years earlier, because it was determined that Herod died in 4 BC, so Jesus must have been born a year or two before that. Now, various chronologies of Jesus' life then suggest that he was baptized and called his first disciples around 26 AD, when Jesus was about 31, and Jesus died when he was about 35. They're sort of rough numbers. Now, Mark, it was estimated he was born about 5 AD and died about 68 AD. And it's generally believed that Mark wrote this book of the Bible around 55 to 65 AD, somewhere in that sort of range, towards the end of his life. Now, Peter was born around 1 AD and died about 66 AD. Now, there's general agreement with these dates, but they are approximate within, a year or so. You can see that even though Mark wasn't one of the original 12 disciples, there is a huge overlap between Jesus, Mark, and Peter. Mark was alive at the same time. He may well have even heard Jesus preach. And there are references in the book of Acts where Mark journeys with Peter, Paul, and Barnabas. Okay, now let's focus in on the 3 to 4 years of Jesus' ministry described by Mark when the disciples were journeying with him, with Jesus. There are lots of occasions when the identity of Jesus is named or questioned. Here are some of them. Impure spirits in chapter 1 refer to Jesus as the Holy One of God. Jesus forgives sins. Only God can do this. Jesus says that he is Lord of the Sabbath. Other impure spirits call Jesus the Son of God. But the disciples are struggling to take it all in. Jesus teaches them in parables, in stories, but their understanding is limited. Then in chapter 4, Jesus calms the storm, and the disciples say to each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." Now this event in chapter 4 is estimated to be in the autumn of 28 AD, so the disciples have been journeying together with Jesus for 2 years by this time. In those 2 years, they'd seen many healings, seen Jesus cast out demons, and presumably heard the demons declare that Jesus is the Son of God, the Holy One of God. They had witnessed Jesus forgiving sins and refer to himself as the Son of Man, the Lord of the Sabbath. And yet, after 2 years of journeying with Jesus in close fellowship, day by day, they still didn't know who Jesus was. Who is this? Again, we see in Mark 5 that impure spirits knew exactly who Jesus was. They refer to Jesus as the Son of the Most High God. The miracles continue in chapter 5. Jesus restores a demon-possessed man, heals a sick woman. He raises a girl from the dead. Jesus continues to perform miracles, and he teaches with incredible wisdom. Then, in a similar way to today's passage, in Mark 6, we read that there is speculation over Jesus' identity. Who is Jesus? Some say that Jesus was John the Baptist, or maybe Elijah come back, or a prophet. Elsewhere, people are saying Jesus might be Jeremiah. Other options are that maybe Jesus was just a liar, or he was a madman, or just a good teacher, or maybe actually Jesus didn't even exist. So to try and sort this out, let's have a little game of Guess Who. It seems odd to me that some thought that Jesus was John the Baptist raised from the dead, when John and Jesus were alive at the same time. They were actually cousins. Now, some manuscripts state that it was Herod that was saying this. Herod was saying that Jesus might be John the Baptist. Now, Herod probably felt guilty about having John killed, so maybe this was a way of dealing with the guilt. So let's rule out that Jesus was John the Baptist. Now the Jews knew of the prophecy from Malachi regarding Elijah returning in some way. Malachi 4 verse 5 says, "I will send the prophet Elijah to you before that great and dreadful day of the Lord." But Elijah didn't return as Jesus. Elijah actually returned as John the Baptist, as stated in Luke 1. John the Baptist will go on before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah. And it's also confirmed by Jesus in Matthew 11. So Jesus wasn't Elijah returning. So was he just another prophet? Well, it's clear from many different references that Jesus claimed to be God, not just a prophet. So that doesn't seem to be an option. So we can rule out that he was just a prophet, or in that case, that he was Jeremiah. Now, I think if you ask people today, many would say that either Jesus didn't exist or that he was simply a good teacher. Well, no serious historian doubts the existence of Jesus. As one scholar of ancient manuscripts puts it, if we believe what the best sources say about Julius Caesar, then we should also believe what the best sources say about Jesus Christ. So we can rule out he didn't exist. Was he just a good teacher though? Well, he claimed to be God. So if he got that wrong, then what else did he get wrong? He can't just be good. So we can get rid of that. Jesus claimed to be God. What do we do with that? C.S. Lewis developed what he calls the trilemma. Now, a dilemma has two options. Here there are three options. Jesus claimed to be God. Either this was false or true. If it was false, then either Jesus knew it was false or he didn't know. If Jesus knew he wasn't God, then he was a liar. So why didn't he just save his own life? Would he be prepared to die for a lie? If he didn't know that he wasn't God, then he was deluded. He was psychotic, a madman. But a madman that was full of wisdom, grace, gentleness, and consistent teaching that was able to confound the wisest of the teachers of the land? That doesn't seem likely. The only option left in the trilemma is that he claimed to be God, and that is true, which means he is Lord. He is the Messiah. So, back to guess who? We can rule out liar, and we can rule out madman, which just leaves Messiah. Back to chapter 6, the miracles continue. The feeding of the 5,000, walking on water, more healings, driving out more demons. Then in chapter 7, after talking in parables, in stories, Jesus says to the disciples, "Are you so dull?" In Mark 8, they are still struggling. "Do you still not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes but fail to see, and ears but fail to hear?" Now, is it just me, or do you get the feeling that Jesus is a little bit frustrated with the disciples by this point? Are you so dull? Do you fail to see, fail to hear? Now, the disciples have been journeying with Jesus for about 3 years by now, and they still don't get it. 3 years since the start of Jesus' ministry, and they don't understand Jesus' identity. But why? Why could they not see what was right in front of them? Remember the image of the woman at the start. Some of you maybe saw it one way, some of you saw it a different way. You only saw the truth when your eyes were opened for you. The demons knew exactly who Jesus was. The characters of faith that we've heard about in the first 8 chapters of Mark believed in Jesus. A woman in chapter 7 referred to Jesus as Lord. but the disciples are struggling. Luke puts it like this in chapter 18. The disciples did not understand any of this. Its meaning was hidden from them. So there is something spiritual going on here. The truth is being hidden from them. I'll read through the passage for today. They came to Bethsaida, and some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. He took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. When he had spit on the man's eyes and put his hands on him, Jesus asked, "Do you see anything?" He looked up and said, "I see people. They look like trees walking around." Once more Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened, his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Jesus sent him home, saying, "Don't even go into the village." Jesus and his disciples went on to the villages around Caesarea Philippi. On the way he asked them, "Who do people say I am?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Peter answered, "You are the Messiah." Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. So some people bring a blind man to Jesus. Notice in the first verse there, a touch from Jesus is all they want. Their faith is such that they believe a touch is enough to heal him. And they're right. There have been occasions when just a touch from Jesus, or even someone just touching Jesus' cloak, has resulted in healing. But not this time. Look at verse 23. Jesus took the blind man by the hand. He touches him, but that doesn't heal him. Jesus wants to do this healing another way. Also note that Jesus leads the blind man out of the village. Why did he do that? I don't think that happens on any other occasion. Now, Jesus had performed miracles in Bethsaida before, but the village was unrepentant, as we read in Matthew 11. So maybe Jesus didn't want to demonstrate his power in that village anymore. The people of Bethsaida will not see the truth. They won't see what's in front of them. Therefore, they shall not see. I counted the number of individual miracles referenced in Mark's Gospel by this point, and I make this healing the 15th miracle recorded. Then also in Mark 1 there is a statement that Jesus healed many others at that time, and he also drove out many demons. But by this stage, 3 years into his ministry on earth, he was nearing the end of performing miracles. Earlier in chapter 8, when the Pharisees asked for a sign, Jesus sighed deeply and said, "Why does this generation ask for a sign? Truly, I tell you, no sign will be given to it." After this healing of the blind man, there are just 2 more miracles recorded in Mark. No more signs. Another question is why use spit on the man's eyes? For me, this has echoes of the salve, the ointment that is referred to in Revelation 3. The church in Laodicea here were spiritually blind, but they did not realize they needed a salve, an ointment on their eyes so they could see. Now, another curious and I think unique aspect of the healing in Mark 8 is that it takes place in stages. It doesn't happen straight away. Why is that? Now, we don't know for sure because the Bible doesn't say, and there's lots of speculation about the reason. What we do know is that Jesus did not make a mistake and that he could have done it in one go. So doing it in stages was deliberate, but why? Maybe to illustrate something? But what? And why is it at this point in the disciples' journey? Remember that just prior to our passage for today, Jesus says to the disciples, "Do you have eyes but fail to see?" He then heals a blind man in stages. I don't think that's a coincidence. Jesus was demonstrating his power, his identity, providing a physical metaphor for the spiritual act that is needed. The disciples had seen healings before, including a blind man, but now something shifts, something changes. Peter sees with eyes of faith. His eyes are opened. He declares for the first time that Jesus is the Messiah. He is Lord. He is the higher power. He is God. Peter starts to understand, in part. He's not completely blind to the truth about Jesus anymore, but he doesn't get it fully. As we'll hear next week, at the end of chapter 8, Jesus predicts his death and resurrection, but Peter pushes back, not realizing what is needed, and Jesus rebukes him for getting it completely wrong. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part. Peter knows in part. He sees in part. He was completely blind to the truth about Jesus in Mark chapter 4, when the disciples say, "Who is this?" But now, in chapter 8, a year later, he starts to see the truth about Jesus' identity. You are the Messiah. His understanding is still confused though. He sees men as trees walking. He sees Jesus as the Messiah, but doesn't appreciate that Jesus needs to die and be raised back to life. Peter was on a journey, as we all are. He is slowly understanding. His eyes are being opened to the truth. As Matthew Henry puts it, like the light of the morning, it shines more and more to the perfect day, and then we will see all things clearly. From Proverbs chapter 4, the path of the righteous is like the morning sun, shining ever brighter till the full light of day. This is a journey of gradual revelation, a journey of faith. Just as with the blind man and the disciples, our eyes are being opened gradually. And it is the Spirit that leads us into more and more truth. He guides us on the journey. But when He, the Spirit of truth, comes, He will guide you into all the truth. It's the Spirit that opens our eyes. He is what we need to see more truth about Jesus. But it is a journey. It doesn't happen all at once, as we read in Romans chapter 1. The gospel unveils a continual revelation of God's righteousness, a perfect righteousness given to us when we believe, and it moves us from receiving life through faith to the power of living by faith. The Christian life is a journey of faith. It starts with salvation, the gift of saving faith, and we receive life through faith. Then it continues as a journey of faith, living by faith, as we trust and believe in God more and more. Our journey is like the disciples. It is a continual revelation about God as He gradually opens our eyes. And we need ever-increasing faith. Faith is described in Hebrews 11. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. The disciples were so human, troubled by doubt, fear, anxiety, just like me, just like you. But faith is the absence of these things. Faith is the absence of doubt, the absence of fear, the absence of anxiety. Think back to some of the examples of people of faith we've heard about in Mark. Chapter 1, a man with leprosy begs for healing. Chapter 2, men bring a paralysed man believing Jesus can heal their friend. Chapter 5, Jairus believes Jesus can heal his daughter. Chapter 7, the woman believed her son could be delivered from a demon. And in our passage today, the people that brought the blind man to Jesus believed he just needed Jesus to touch him, to be healed. That is faith. It took faith, confidence in what they hoped for. They believed in Jesus, believed that he could help them, that he could perform miracles. We need our eyes to be open to the truth about Jesus, to have this faith. Consider the disciples walking along the road to Emmaus after Jesus rose from the dead. They didn't recognize Jesus at first. They needed their eyes opening. So where are you on the journey of seeing the truth about Jesus? Are you moving towards him or away from him? Or are you in neutral? Are you just starting out, or have you been journeying with Jesus for many years? If you are just starting to seek, then the key question is, who do you say Jesus is? Remember the game of Guess Who? Who is Jesus? That's a key question. When we read the Bible, there is no other option but that he is claiming to be God. He is saying, I am the higher power. So, do you believe him? Or is he a liar or a madman? If you've been journeying for many years with Jesus, how is that going? Are you full of life, full of joy and hope? Then great. Carry on in the journey of faith. Or are you struggling in the journey? Maybe stuck in a bit of a rut, discouraged by sin, not seeing much change. One bit of wisdom I heard recently is, live in the day, measure by the decade. The Christian journey is lifelong. If we compare ourselves to last week or last month, it can be discouraging, like we're not getting anywhere. But try comparing yourself to how you were a decade ago, and hopefully you can see how your faith has grown since then. The disciples journeyed with Jesus, and they discovered his true identity as their eyes were opened. That's our journey as well. Wherever you are on the journey of faith, if there's one thing that you do as a result of this talk, just simply cry out to God and ask him to open your eyes some more about the truth of who Jesus is. Let's pray. First, a verse from Hebrews 12. Let us keep looking to Jesus. He is the one who started this journey of faith, and he is the one who completes the journey of faith. Jesus, thank you for the truth that you are God. You are the Messiah. Open our eyes to your truth. Complete our journey of faith. Amen.